Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Data Model Design. In today's episode, we are going to solve another data model design problem statement, and we are going to identify the dimension tables, the fact tables, and the relevant column names. How is that we are going to create for those dimensions and fact tables, and solve the SQL statements which are related to this problem statement. So let's get started. The problem statement is we are developing a comprehensive database system for managing investments in stocks, funds, and cryptocurrencies for a financial institution. The aim is to provide insights into customer investment behavior, portfolio performance, and market trends to optimize investment strategies and enhance customer satisfaction. So, that is the business use case. And they would like to solve these problem statements here. And the first one is analyze customer investment preferences and behaviors across different asset classes. So they are mentioning different asset classes, and the different asset classes is stocks, funds, and cryptocurrencies. Um, so while going through this business use case and the problems which they provided us to solve, uh, we should be able to identify, like, what are the dimension tables we should be able to create here and what will be under fact tables. So here, the first statement, we should be able to know there is a dimension table. We can name that as an asset here. So let me start with the dimension tables here. And also I'll create one more box for the fact tables. Dimension tables. So I'll just call first one as asset. And also if you see here, the first one is analyze customer investment. So there should be some user table here. And the second one is monitor portfolio performance and identify top performing assets. So assets we have in dimension. And let's come to the fact table here. First one will be portfolio. The third statement is track market trends and assets, the impact on customer portfolios, optimize asset allocation and diversification to maximize returns and minimize risk. And the last one is provide personalized investment recommendations and insights to customers based on their investment history and risk profile. So another one I can think of from the fact table is transaction table. So there is a difference between portfolio and transaction. Portfolio should contain the price at which the user is trying to buy that asset, and the transaction will have the price plus the transaction amount. So whenever we make a buy or a sell, there is a small transaction amount associated to the actual price. So that kind of information we'll be maintaining in the actual transaction table, and the portfolio will be at the user level, and how many assets he has, and on what date he purchased, and what is the price at which he purchased that. And user table, just the user information. And the asset table is what kind of asset it is, like what is the symbol for that one, what is the ID for that, and what is the company name, to which sector it can belong to. So let's start with the asset table. So whenever they are providing us this business use case, if you look at my first data model design problem, I went through a detailed question, like what we are supposed to ask in the real interviews. So pretty much it's applicable for every data model design here. So it doesn't matter, like, what kind of business use case we are trying to solve. Those kind of questions we'll be asking at every data model design question. So that's applicable for every data model design question here. So I'm not going through that questionnaire one more time. You can refer to that first video for the data model design which we created for Apparel Mart. So I'll start with the user table here. I'll start with user dimension table. So user dimension table, it's just the information about the user. It can consist of user ID, username, email, and let's say some registration date for that. Let's say interactive brokers, so that we can say like when is that he got registered to that one. So it's a very basic information of the user. So let me pull the user information here. So that one comes under the dimension table. And the second dimension table is the asset. So asset table, it can consist of asset ID, asset name. So asset name can be just an example, Apple, and asset type. So asset type they have provided here. It can be anything from stocks, funds, or cryptocurrencies. So in this case, if we take Apple as an example, that's a stock there. And the symbol, what is the symbol of Apple, and to which company it belongs to. So it's a technological company, and what is the market value? So some kind of information, and which sector that one belongs to, and what is the industry for that one. So that kind of information we should be able to gather in the asset table. So these are dimension tables, and when coming to fact table, let's start with portfolio. So this portfolio will be at the user level. So a user can have is personalized portfolio where it will be having all the assets that user purchased, and what is the quantity of each asset, and what is the purchase date, and what can be the purchase price. So that kind of information can be available in portfolio table. So let me grab this one. So if you see here, we have the portfolio ID of each user and what kind of assets he has. Just the asset ID we are maintaining here, and we can join it back to the asset table with asset ID to get all the relevant information about that asset there. And what is the purchase price on that day for that asset. And the transaction table, it can consist of transaction ID. Again, that will be at the user level. So that should have a user ID, asset ID, and a transaction type. So transaction type can be buy or sell. And what is the quantity he bought or he sold. So this portfolio, whatever purchase quantity he has, so this one belongs to a buy statement here. So in the transaction table, it can be both buy or sell. And what will be the transaction date? So let me pull this transaction table here. So this one we can have additional columns, like we can always discuss with our interviewer, like if we can just go to much more granular level, we can add a few more columns here. We can say what will be the transaction amount. So transaction fee. So there will be a transaction fee associated for every transaction, and that will be our original market price plus some transaction fee for that particular transaction. So we can always discuss with our interviewer how granular level we are supposed to present in these fact tables. So now we have identified our dimension tables and fact tables. Again, as I mentioned in my first interview series for the data model, interviewer will be asking us much more in-depth questions at each and every stage. So the questions can vary, like can we identify much more, like dimension tables, or can we have this asset table in this format, or if let's say if asset, like huge volumes of data is coming, can we take out couple of columns here and have a separate table on its own. So it all depends on, like how the interview conversation is going on, and depending upon the questions the interviewer will be asking, we can come up with that kind of solutions at that point. But if we are prepared, the end-to-end data model design, in-depth concepts, we should be able to handle any kind of business use case. So once we have these dimensions and fact tables, let's start with our first SQL statement here. I'll just pull this here. And the first SQL statement we have to solve from the data model we created is find the total amount invested in stocks, funds, and cryptocurrencies by each customer. So usually these SQL statements that will be again tied back to the problems they are asking us to solve. So here they just provided at a very high level what is that they need from this business use case. And based on that, we identified our dimension tables and fact tables. And once we have our dimensions and facts, they will provide us the actual SQL statements. What is that? How is that we are going to tackle that? And we can always go back and add a couple of more columns to our dimensions and fact tables in case we just realized we don't have that particular column in that table in order to solve these SQL statements. So I'll start with the first one. Let me copy this one. Find the total amount. Find the total amount invested in stocks, funds, and cryptocurrencies by each customer. So the asset information we know it will be coming from what is the asset type here. That will be stock, funds, and cryptocurrencies by each customer. So we need user table and asset table here to get the total amount invested. Again, total amount invested will be on the portfolio. So how much he invested for each asset, what is the quantity and what is the purchase price for that one. So that will be total amount will be quantity times purchase price. So we are going to use all these three tables, users, assets and portfolio. So let's start with the SQL statement. I'll use the user ID. Since the user ID is common for both users and portfolios, I need to maintain some alias here. I'll start with you. So I'll use the asset type. If asset type is stock, then I'm just doing a sum of, then that will be P dot quantity here. So I'll just copy this times purchase price. Else 0 as I'll just call this one as total stocks. And I'll just copy the same one and similarly for funds, and this one is for cryptocurrencies. I'll call this as funds. I'll just call this as crypto here. And now we are going to join all these three tables here from users U, do an inner join. So there is no join between users and assets directly. So we are going to use portfolio here. P dot user ID is equal to user ID. And I'll just say P dot, I have to do an inner join to assets table and join the asset ID here and use a group by user ID and username. So now we have for each user and the username, what is the sum of the stock If the asset type is stock, what is the sum he has, like total quantity and the purchase price as the total stock, and this will be as total funds, how many funds that user has, and how much crypto investment he did. So we need to understand, like how is that we are going to join these tables. So for example, we cannot join user and assets directly because there is no common column here. So it has to come through portfolio. We are joining user table and portfolio using our user ID, and then we are joining our asset ID to the asset table here. So this should be the first problem statement here. Let's start with the second one. And in real interviews also, we'll be writing the pseudo code for the data model design. There is no need to execute these actual queries because whatever column names we come up, it's up to us, like what column names we are going to use. So there will be no predefined schema. They will be getting that ready for us. So we'll just write the pseudocode for whatever model we designed. And second statement here is identify the customers who have made the largest single transaction by amount. So this should be a straightforward. They said largest single transaction by amount. So we can directly query the transaction table and then join it back to user table to get the username and have the maximum transaction price here. So what will be the who made the largest single transaction? So just get the maximum transaction price here. That should be a straightforward. I'll say select user ID, username, maximum transaction amount or price. I'll call this as largest single transaction from transaction table, do a inner join to user table. And since this is an aggregated value we are trying to extract, just do a group by on these columns. And the other one is identify the customers who have made the largest one. So that should be only a single one. So we'll just do a limit. So that should be order by the column which we extracted for the maximum transaction price, and we can have a limit one. So again here it's a straightforward. So we used a limit one here, but again we need to check with the interviewer if he or she is okay to use limit, or if they want to test our knowledge on rank functions. Maybe they'll ask us not to use limit, and we should be able to write the rank function there. So it's always good to check with the interviewer first, like, what is the approach you're taking here, what tables you are going to join, and what columns you are going to use there. So um, we'll give some kind of information to the interviewer upfront so that he or she can stop right away and say, like, don't use that. You can use a window function or you can use a rank function instead of limit there. So this one is a pretty straightforward and very simple question here. I'll copy the third one here. Calculate the total amount withdrawn from each fund in past month. So for this one, they said total amount withdrawn from each fund. So asset type is the fund here. So asset type is fund and how much it's withdrawn in the last month. So we need to again join our user table, asset table, and the we need to we need to again understand like which table we should use here, portfolio table or transaction table. So again, we need to know what is the so if we are going to use a portfolio table, that should be fine. Again, we can check with the interviewer the purchase, the difference between the purchase price and the transaction price. The only difference is transaction price will have purchase price plus the transaction fee, and the purchase price will have just the purchase price or the market value when that asset is bought or that when that asset is sold. So we need to check with the interviewer which one we need to say. Like when they ask total amount withdrawn from each fund in the past month. So when we say here as a transaction type, so here we need to understand withdrawn from each fund. So with this withdrawn, from which table we will get? We'll get from portfolio table or from the transaction table. The way we created this table is a transaction type. If you see here a transaction type here, it can be three things here. I'll just put it here. It can be a buy transaction, or it can be a sell transaction, or it can be a withdrawn transaction. And when it comes to portfolio purchase price here, as I mentioned, this is just the price, and portfolio will have just the assets when we buy that asset. So nothing else. Like the transaction is always refer back to the buy transaction here from the transaction table. But the transaction table will maintain again the detailed information on buy, sell, and withdrawn. So now we need to join transaction table and what is the asset so let's go back to the question. So do I need to join the asset table also? If so, why I need asset table for that one? For each fund. So they mentioned here for each fund. So either we can say the asset type is fund here. That's why we need the asset table here. So we need to join transaction table, asset table, and user table. So let's get started. Select asset name. So that will be a fund here for each fund. So it can be again, this is kind of confusing here for each fund. So um, the one which they mentioned fund, is it an asset type or they want to see for each one, like for stock amount and for funds, how much amount is there, and for cryptos, how much amount is there, and how much we have withdrawn from each of those assets. And once we get some clarification from the interviewer, we can either use a hard-coded value where asset type is equal to fund, or there is no need to use any hard-coded value. We'll assume we are going to get all the assets, whatever it's available, and just do a group by on that one. So let's take the second approach here to just make sure, like we are covering all the assets here. So select asset name. I'll say as fund name. Sum of transaction price as total withdrawn. Do a inner join on assets table. So here they did not mention it's on the user level. So this is not on the user level, so there is no need to join the user table. So if they mention like for each user, what is the withdrawal fund or withdrawal asset type in the past month, then we can add the user ID also. But I think they just mentioned overall, like overall last month for each asset type, what is the total amount withdrawn. So there is no need to join the user table here. So just the transaction table and the user table, and the condition here is the transaction type is the one which we have here, withdrawn. And the condition is in within the last month. So that will be transaction date. You can say transaction date between current date and do a group by asset name. If the interviewer specifically mentions, like, we just want to see just on the asset type, here asset type can be three types here. That will be stock, fund, and crypto. So depending upon the time, even in the real interviews, after we mention the column names for each table, we can have again a separate same some kind of notes just to mention, like depending upon the time we can give some examples, like here we went back and we are making sure we know what is the asset type here. So I just added just an example how the asset type looks like. Here again, like we added how the transaction type looks like, and we need to know the difference between purchase price and the transaction price. So we can have a separate note or something like a sticky notes here to just mention, like, what when the columns what we are trying to create, what will be the expected value in that columns. So it again depends on the interview. Sometimes they will make sure, like, we have all those sample values available, and even that will be helpful for us to when we are working on the SQL statements, because uh, our understanding and our interview understanding may not be same. So we need to clearly mention, if we mention asset type, what is the asset type we think of? Like asset type for us is a stock, fund, and crypto. Maybe for the interviewer, it may be something else. So it's always better to have that kind of detailed information provided to them. Let's start with the fourth one. Find top three performing stocks based on percentage change in price over the past year. So now we need to find top three performing stocks. Performing stocks. So our asset type will be a stock there. Asset type will be stock, and top three performing stocks. So that will be our market price minus. So let's say here asset is a market price. So that's the price. That's today's price. And the purchase price is, let's say I bought Apple 1 year back. I bought, let's say, for $100. And now for the current market price, it's at $170. So what will be the difference between those prices? So it's not on again on the user level, it's on the entire portfolio level. So for entire portfolio, for all the assets, what will be the top three performing assets there? So let's start with select asset ID. Again, which asset ID? So I'll start with the portfolio asset ID. Let me put the from tables here. That will be easy to know exactly what columns we are trying to use here. So that will be from portfolio P, do a inner join on assets table. Asset ID is equal to P dot asset ID. And again here they mentioned performing stocks. So they just want to know asset type is equal to stock, or they just want to know stocks and also crypto. So we need to again get some clarification on that. So here I'll just assume it's just on the stocks. So that will be put inner join on the asset ID, and the condition will be where asset type is equal to stock. So now we are clear on this part. Let's go back here to our select statement. So for each asset, we need to know the difference between the current market price. We can say current market price, and it can be either way. It can be like I bought, let's say, Apple stock for $200 last year, and today's price is 170, so I have a loss of $30 there. It should be always calculated using the market price minus purchase price. Purchase price, and since they mentioned percentage, let me put this one here. Divided by purchase price, P dot purchase price. So now we'll get the percentage of each asset here, and we don't know what will be the top three at this time, but we know the percentage of each asset from the portfolio table. Let's call this one as, I'll just say price change. And now we can do a select. So what we just selected asset ID here, but we'll just select the symbol in the final output. So that will be select symbol, and then I'll use the sum of, I'll call this one as, I'll just call this one as percentage change. Sum of percentage change here as total percentage change from our CTE table. I need to do an inner join again with the asset table, or we can directly, no need to do an inner join. I'll just add symbol here itself. There is no need to join asset table one more time here. Then yeah, only condition is we need to check for the past 1 year, just the condition here. And even that one I need to add here. That will be purchase date. It's not transaction date. I'll change it and I'll say purchase date. Purchase date between current date and interval of, let's say, 365 days and current date. So that gives the 1 year information. And just do a group by symbol, order by price change, descending, and do a limit of 3 here. Again, we are just using a limit here. We need to check with their interviewer if they are okay to use limit. If not, we can go back and change this to a rank function. So let me just put that in the rank function here. So in the output, in the final output, we need to know the symbol and the sum. So I need to have these two here, and I'll create a rank here. So that will be rank over. I'm just calculating the rank on the sum, and the order by sum should be a descending order, and I'll just call that as a rank here. And here I'll select. Where Rn is less than or equal to 3. So we are just selecting the symbol and total per change, total percentage change, where our rank is less than or equal to 3. So that should solve the fourth problem here. Let's start with the fifth one. Determine the customers who have invested in both stocks and cryptocurrencies. So this should be just on the asset table here, and we need to find the customers or the users. So we need to join even with the users table. And the asset type should be both stock and cryptocurrencies, and the users who has bought both. So we can have a condition on the count where our asset type, the count of asset type is equal to 2. That should give us the result here. So let me start with select user ID. I'll call this one as u dot user ID. From user table, do an inner join on portfolio. Because there is no direct join between asset and user, we have to go through portfolio. P dot user ID, a dot u dot user ID. And the condition we need to check here is where asset type in two asset types. They asked for stock and crypto. And do a group by on user ID. And the other condition we have to check is having count of distinct asset type is equal to 2. So let's say a user bought only stock here, then the count of distinct asset type will not be equal to 2. Only the user who bought both stock and crypto, those users, this condition will be met. So we are looking only for that user ID here, and that is what the question is about. Determine the customers who invested in both stocks and cryptocurrencies. So that should solve this problem here. So the the questions what I have taken in this data model design or for this entire example, they pretty much fall on easy to medium size. So we can expect these level in the real interviews. So in the first um, interview series for this data model design, I went on the harder side to just give you an example, like, we have to be prepared even for the hard level questions there. But mostly these are the levels we can expect in the real interviews. And also, as I mentioned in my first video, They will be asking much more details on slowly changing dimensions, normalization, partition keys, and also some kind of information on dimensions and fact tables. So we have to be prepared to answer those questions. Hopefully, you learned something from this video, and thanks for watching this video.